love him or hate him, I think at the end of the day, when he was living in Australia, Tristan Kuhn did actually make some good videos that actually picked up on quite a lot of things about Australia that maybe we wouldn't have noticed, or things that are worth recognising. Some of the things he was a little bit off, he didn't quite get it right, but sometimes he got it right. And one of the things I like about him is that he was prepared to do his research. So in this video he's talking about 10 things that Australia could learn from America. I found it interesting. There's some things I agreed with, some things where, once again, I was a bit unsure. But let's jump in and have a look.
What's good, y'all? Tristan here, and today I'm going to be going over 10 things that Australia could learn from America. Let's get into it. Number one, the first thing Australia could learn from America is how to make a milkshake. So, what you consider a milkshake in Australia would not be considered a milkshake in America. The first time I got a milkshake here, I literally sloshed it around and gave it back to them and told them that they didn't make my milkshake right. In Australia, when they make a milkshake, it's literally pretty much 90% milk, and they might put one scoop of ice cream in there and blend it up. In America, a milkshake is not mainly milk, it's mostly ice cream. It's pretty much a bunch of ice cream and then just a little bit of milk or something, something to make it a little bit more liquidy. You usually have to suck it super hard to get it up, you have a fat straw. It takes a long time to drink and you are stuffed at the end, they're super filling. In Australia, I describe a milkshake as just I don't know, a thing of milk with a little bit of extra sweetness to it.
So by that, I'm guessing that they don't differentiate between milkshakes and thick shakes in the United States, because what he's just described is a thick shake, whereas for us a milkshake is milk with a scoop of ice cream and maybe a little bit of cream on top. I think also that our idea of an iced coffee is different from their idea of an iced coffee. I think our frappes are perhaps a bit more like their iced coffees. I'm not sure, but I know that there is a difference. But yeah, just a difference in what you call it. We would call what he's describing a thick shake, whereas clearly in America their idea of a milkshake is a thick shake.
The second thing Australia could learn from America is to have more 24-hour shops and restaurants, and also just longer store hours in general. Pretty much nothing here is open 24/7, maybe a McDonald's, but there's not much. And then on top of that, just everything closes so freaking early here. Banks open 9:30 to 4. Shops that would close at 9 p.m. in America close here around 6 p.m. Just 2 days ago, I was at a shopping mall and some of the shops were starting to close their door. I was like, what time is it? And it was 4 p.m. And then the person that I was with was Australian, and they're like, oh yeah, it's Friday. It makes sense that they're closing at 4. To me, that blows my mind. In America, if you're not a 9-to-5 business, a office type of thing, then you're probably going to be open till 9 p.m.
I have to disagree with that. I think if you are someone who works full-time, then for the most part, when you finish work, unless you're going to stop in at the supermarket, which will be open, mostly you're just going to be keen to just hop on the train or the bus or hop in your car and head home. Most people who work full-time are going to do shopping for clothes, etc. on the weekend, not after work. So I think it's a cultural thing. In Australia, we just don't need our stores to be open 24/7. And, at the end of the day, you've got Kmart, Target, Big W, which are open for longer hours. So really, what we've got suits us fine here. I guess we're just not as consumeristic as America. We don't need 24-hour shops because, well, we just don't. And the trade-off too is that in Australia we have better wages for staff. Stores in America can afford 24/7 training because they pay their staff a crap amount of money. In Australia, there is a minimum wage, so stores can't open 24 hours because for those many hours overnight when there's almost no customers coming in, they're going to be losing money because they've still got to pay wages.
Alright, the third thing that Australia could learn from America is like so Australian. You guys would love this. This literally combines like some of the most Australian things and puts it all into one. And that is tailgates or tailgating. Tailgating has total Australian vibes. Like literally, if you don't know what tailgating is, pretty much it's before a sporting event, usually American football, but you can really do it for whatever. You, a bunch of friends, you all camp out outside the stadium and you chill out there the whole day before the game. You have a barbecue, you might play some drinking games, you're definitely drinking, you're listening to music, you're having fun. It's just like pretty much a party, a pre-game, like a, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, before the event. But it's not just like you and your friends, there'll be a bunch of tailgates around like the entire area. So literally just the whole part of town will be lively, they'll be in a good mood, they'll be drunk, they'll be, I don't know, repping their team's jersey. Delicious smells of meat, barbecue, prawn, like all that in the air. I honestly don't know how you don't already have it here. Like Barbies, huge in Australia. Drinking, huge in Australia. And sports, really big in Australia. Just put all those into one, bam, you got yourself a tailgate.
Oh, hell no!
Nah, that is not something that we want here in Australia, ever. Can you imagine people getting drunk and then heading into a sports event? We'd have the sort of disasters that you see at sports events in England. And, you know, Australians can be complete utter yobbos when they get drunk. There's a reason why we have laws which prevent people drinking in public spaces. So for starters, the laws are going to prevent these tailgate parties. But can you imagine the crowds heading into the MCG for the grand final, just thinking, for example, for this year, and with a bunch of people who are just way over the limit? It's a recipe for disaster. So no, I will let America keep their tailgates. We don't want it here. I mean, you just have to look at the sort of crap that goes on at Schoolies Week every year. And, you know, when you know Schoolies Week is coming up, you brace yourself for the news reports about some teenager falling off a balcony or something because they've drank too much and made a stupid decision. And he's suggesting we have that here at sporting events? Not at all. No, thank you.
Alright, this next one is gonna piss a lot of Australians off, I'm telling you right now. And that is, the next thing Australia could learn from America is how to barbecue. Now, I'm not talking about having like snags on a barbie or like, you know, burgers on a grill. I'm talking about like proper, slow-cooked, smoked meat. Brisket, ribs, that type of barbecue. Now I am from Texas, which is like the capital pretty much of like good barbecue, not Kansas City. So I've been spoiled all my life with good slow cooked meat. And even though the rest of America isn't as good as Texas is at cooking their meat, I do feel like from my experience, the meat has been more tender, more like moist in the States than it is here in Australia. That is just my personal opinion from what I've had here. I don't think it's because of like a cooking inability. I just think it's like the preference of how you like your meat here in Australia. It still tastes good, there's still good barbecue, it's just not done quite as well as it's done in America, or at least definitely in Texas.
Again, I think that comes down to a cultural thing. Our idea of a barbecue is rock up with your meats, and it's about spending time with family or friends and everything. And it's not about creating a culinary masterpiece. Whereas the sort of barbecue that he's referring to is more of it's a different kind of thing. It's not where you're barbecuing with everyone hanging out together, from my understanding. And quite often, you know, what he's referring to as barbecuing is cooking stuff indoors. It's a very different style of barbecue. That said, I did have acquaintances once where the guy was from Canada, and his wife had learned how to cook barbecue ribs, and she did that for us one night, and they were just amazing. The meat just fell off the bone, and they did taste truly delicious. So yes, slow cooked meat is, yeah, utterly divine, but in Australia I think we would do that as a slow cooker type meal, it's a very different kind of style of barbecue to what we have, basically. And yes, it's that time of day again when the Chihuahua manages to snore about as loud as any little dog possibly could.
Now my fifth thing is customer service. By no means is the customer service here in Australia bad, but America is known for having the best, like most exceptional customer service. You go into a store, you go to buy clothes, there's probably gonna be someone there just like greeting you as you walk in. If you need anything, they will bend over backwards to get it for you. I've heard people from other countries complain that American customer service is like too friendly. And if that's your opinion, that's fine, but I personally like the friendly customer service and I think America does it really well. Probably the biggest reason for this is because a lot of Americans do work for tips, but also even at like clothing stores, a lot of them will work on commission, which means like, yes, they get an hourly rate, but on top of that, they get paid more based upon how much clothes they sell. So that's also why in America, like when you're buying clothes, sometimes they'll ask you like, oh, who helped you out today? And you'll be like, oh, I don't know. And they'll be like, oh no, who? Oh, can you point to them? It's because like they want to make sure they get that extra commission.
So what he's saying there, to me, once again sounds like a cultural difference. And it sounds like something that I'm glad we don't do in Australia, because what the description to me is basically getting that hard sell when you go in a store. His belief is that that is customer service. You walk in the door and a customer service person is all over you, wanting to help you out and wanting to sell you something. Whereas to me, that's invading my space, and that's impinging on my shopping experience. I actually really, really hate when I go into a store and someone is trying to do a hard sell on me. I prefer to be left alone, and I'll ask for help if I need it, rather than have someone straight onto me and trying to sell me stuff that I probably don't want. And I think a lot of Australians are like me. They prefer to be left alone to shop and make their own decisions and not have that hard sell forced upon them. And I mean, in terms of when you get to the counter, we do have pretty damn good customer service when you actually are ready to purchase whatever it is you've found. Yes, there are some stores where it is frustrating when you're looking for someone to give you help and you can't find someone to give you help. Hello, Bunnings. But at the same time, you know, there's got to be that balance. And yeah, I hate it. If I know that a store is somewhere where they're going to be really pushy, then I tend not to go back.
Alright, my sixth one I find is quite annoying about Australia, and that is y'all don't have yellow road lines. So most Australians probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but let me explain. So if you're on a road that it's like two lanes going the same way, it looks like this. If you're on a road where it's one lane each way but cars can go and you can't pass, it looks like this. But if it's a road with cars coming each way and you can pass, it looks like this. Quite similar. Actually, not similar. Identical. Just because I'm used to driving in America, when I see a road like this, I sometimes think I can drive in that other lane. How the roads work in America, if it is two lanes going in the same direction, it looks like this. If there's two lanes going in opposite directions, it looks like this. Oh, and you can't pass. And if it's two roads in opposite directions and you can pass, it looks like this. Pretty much it's the same as y'all in the fact that you can pass whenever it's a striped or dotted line like that, but if it's a solid line, then you can't pass. But if cars in that lane are going the same direction as you, it'll be white, and if they're coming in the opposite direction, it will be yellow. I find this as something that's very simple, very basic, but I don't know. For me, it's very helpful.
I don't know, it's just apples and oranges, isn't it? I mean, it's just, you've got your way of doing it over there, we've got our way of doing it over here. I don't know if it makes a huge difference whether the lines are white or yellow. I would imagine that the majority of Australians know when they can cross to the other side of the road and when they can't. I think the majority of Australians know when they're on a dual carriage road or when it's on a two-way road. And if they don't, then they probably shouldn't be driving. So I can imagine that perhaps it was a little bit confusing for him coming here. But once again, apples and oranges. This is what we're used to, that's what he's used to. you go to another country, you adapt to their way of doing things.
Ooh, it is really getting bright, and you can totally see the camera shadow on me. This shadow, like, looks like a microphone I'm talking into. But anyways, the seventh thing I think Australia could learn from America is how to be nicer to dogs. Let them live their life, you know? No, okay, let me explain a little bit what I mean by this. What I mean is, in Australia, dogs are not allowed in a lot of places. I go on a hiking trail, no dogs allowed sign. I go to a beach, no dogs allowed on the beach. I feel like in pretty much all like big like public park areas or like hiking trails, dogs aren't allowed. And same with the beaches. Where do you take your dogs to get exercise? Like the little park that I'm in, like this, maybe a dog park, I don't know, I haven't been to a dog park, but I do know that they exist here. It blows my mind all the places that dogs aren't allowed in America. And granted, before I say this, I am from Austin, which is probably like, it might be the most dog-friendly city in all of America. Like, it is very dog-friendly, but overall in America, dogs are pretty much allowed everywhere, like at every park and whatnot. Yes, there might be rules saying like they have to be kept on a leash. Yes, you do need to pick up their shit, but I don't know, I feel like in Australia, because, I don't know, they might poop on the trail or something, they just have totally banned dogs. Beyond this, when I was living in Melbourne, this is not super common, but I saw this probably maybe 5 times in my 5 months there, was you would see dogs literally like taking a shit and peeing on the concrete, like on the sidewalk, like right outside an apartment. Dog owners would literally walk out the apartment, there wouldn't be any like park or grass area nearby, so they would just, you know, walk them around the block, and whenever the dog wanted to do its business, it would just do it right on the sidewalk where people walk, and then, I mean, obviously they'd pick it up, but I would never, ever, ever see that in America. Obviously, I know Australians do not hate dogs. You love your dogs just as much as us. I've just been surprised at how strict your dog laws are. However, one thing I will say y'all are very nice at, good with, is dogs are allowed at a lot of restaurants here. Obviously not inside the restaurant, but like in the outdoor patio area, it is really common for dogs to be able to like be with you while you eat your food in the patio area.
Now, I have to actually agree with him here. Australia over-regulates where dogs can be allowed. Although mainland Australia, or Victoria and New South Wales at least, I can't comment for the other states, Tassie is so much better than Victoria and New South Wales in terms of not just where dogs can be allowed, but where dogs can be allowed off leash. I mean, where I used to live in Tassie, there were so many options for places that I could take my dogs and have them off leash, which was convenient because my old Chihuahua that I had was a little bit neurotic, and he actually would not wear a collar or a lead, so he always had to go off lead. So places we went were places where I could take him off lead, and there was barely anywhere that you would go where dogs weren't allowed. At the beaches, they had areas that over the summer, particular parts of the beach were closed for dogs, and you had to go to the allocated dog section, and over summer the dogs had to be on a lead there. There were some parks where dogs had to be on leads, but for the most part, if it was a public area in Tasmania, you could take your dog. Whereas here in Victoria, it is so heavily regulated. I can remember when I first moved to Bendigo, going to the local lake, and like I said, my old Chihuahua wouldn't go on a lead, and it was never an issue in Tasmania because there were places that I could take him in Tasmania where he could go and not be on a lead. And also dog owners in Tasmania were just accepting of it. Even if I went to areas where he was supposed to be on a lead, I rarely came across people who were upset about him not being on a lead. My other dog would be on a lead, he would be with us, not causing any problems, and nobody ever blinked an eyelid. When I moved to Bendigo, I ended up having to stop taking my dogs places because people would become really abusive over this pocket-sized Chihuahua being off lead, and I would pick him up anytime another dog started to approach. So it's not like he even had access to other dogs, but people would just be like so abusive over my dog being off lead. I found that in New South Wales, people were even more nasty about dogs off lead. I loved when I went to Port Macquarie, there's a fantastic dog beach there, and I could take them there, and I think Port Macquarie was a lot more relaxed in terms of dogs off leash. But a lot of other places in New South Wales, people were so negative about dogs being off leash. And the other thing I've found in Victoria and New South Wales is that people don't know how to socialise their dogs. So my dogs growing up in Tasmania were accustomed to going to dog parks 2 or 3 times a week, and it was just normal at the dog parks that, you got to know a lot of the other owners. You'd be sitting there having a conversation, and your dogs would be having a conversation. And you'd go to the dog park, and the dogs would be all wanting to greet each other and have a chat and say hello. Here in Victoria, and I found the same in New South Wales, if your dog tries to say hello to another dog, people get really, really upset. And some people even become abusive. And likewise, I've also found that in Victoria and New South Wales, people won't greet your dog, or very rarely will they greet your dog. In Tassie, wherever you go, there's always going to be heaps of people who just want to stop and say hello to your dog. My Kelpie Lab Cross is the sweetest dog on the planet. And for, the first 8 years or so of her life, she was accustomed to people greeting her and patting her and talking to her whenever she was out in public. And here in Victoria, even 6 years on, she still gets horribly upset when people ignore her, because she wants to greet everybody. She wants to be friendly and get a pat and have them talk to her, and people do not want to talk to her at all. And I just find it really odd. There's just this real standoffish attitude of people in Victoria and in New South Wales towards dogs. I found it ironic when I was on my road trip and I stopped in at Gundagai, because you've got to, haven't you? So I'm there at Gundagai with my dogs, and I had my youngest Chihuahua, who was about 10 weeks old at that stage. So she was so very incredibly cute, and she was just learning to go on a lead with a little harness, and she had come from a breeder with heaps of kids. She loves kids. She sees kids and she wants to go over and greet them because she grew up around kids. And I just remember stopping at Gundagai and this family just losing the plot because Amira wanted to greet this kid. And I didn't actually have her on her harness at the time because, like I said, she was still learning to walk on a harness. And she dashed over to these kids, this itty bitty teeny weeny Chihuahua puppy. And this kid ran to his parent, and the parent picked him up and was like, oh, essentially big scary dog. And they were looking at me like I was some hideous monster. And I actually had to pick up Amira and carry her because this family was having this ridiculous reaction to this pocket-sized Chihuahua wanting to greet their child. I couldn't believe it. So, yeah, I think Tristan's got a point. It's a very long way of saying it. I just had to have my little rant there. But, yeah, I think Australia needs to chill out a bit in terms of where dogs are allowed. I'm glad that there are plenty of good cafes now that allow dogs. But in terms of parks and where dogs are allowed in public and everything, councils seem to be going the opposite way right now and becoming more restrictive over where you can have your dog, which is just insane because so many Australians love having their dogs with them. For me, I travelled the entire East Coast with my dogs. If I'm going to do a road trip, my dogs go with me most of the time. So, you know, and so many people do that these days. But there's just more and more restrictions on where you can take your dogs. Anyway, rant over.
Now the ninth thing that I think Australia could learn from America is nothing. I don't have any more. Guys, I spent over a month trying to think of things for this list. I've been examining my surroundings. I've been trying really hard to think of things that I think Australia could learn from America, and I cannot come up with 10 things. So
okay, it's my theory that Tristan just never breathes, because I have found it really, really hard with this video to try and break the video at the right spots without him shooting off into another word. So I apologise for that. I know I've done that in several spots in this video where I've cut him off halfway through a word. But like I said, he just doesn't seem to break in between his sentences. He just goes straight on to the next thing without breathing. So I like that he said, well, for the last thing, I've got nothing else. And it's actually pretty good that he's only come up with 7 things that he thinks that America could teach Australia. And like I said, some of them I think are just cultural differences, and I don't think they are things that America could teach Australia. I did agree with him about dog culture in Australia, but the other things I think were more to do with cultural things. I definitely disagreed with the idea of tailgate parties. I think that would be a huge disaster in Australia, and I cringe at the thought of what could happen if there were tailgate parties before sporting events in Australia. But anyway, thanks for listening. If you're new, please hit the subscribe button. Also, please hit the like button, that helps get me out there in the algorithm. And leave a comment below. Tell me what your thoughts are on these things that Tristan has brought up today.